David Davis, the former Foreign Office Minister, and he's with me now. And a very good morning to you, Mr. Davis. So you think, what, a couple of weeks and we should finally see Chilcot. What about the referendum campaign? You don't think it would have an impact on that?
It's got nothing to do with the referendum campaign. I mean, both sides are implicated. The Tories supported it. The Labour government went for it, as it were, the Iraq war, that is. So there's no political dimension, and it's got nothing to do with Europe. It's one of the few things at the moment that's got nothing to do with Europe. So it should take at most 2 weeks to security clear it. Remember, everything in it's already been poured over by Whitehall a number of times, and there's worry that Number 10 a few weeks ago started saying, "Oh well, will this be in June and July?" Why? And is we still in the era of hot lead type setting? I mean,
All right. Well, even if it doesn't, even if it has no particular bearing on decisions made in the referendum, it drowns it out. But would that be that would be no bad thing for a while?
Look, I mean, we have been talking about Europe now for 2 months, and we've got at least another month to go, month and a half to go. So people will talk about other things. I mean, and this is very important. I mean, it's fundamental to decisions taken in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq. It's also incredibly important to the families of the soldiers, the 179 soldiers who died, who are going through agony, being made to wait for closure.
Well, you mentioned Syria there, and I know you've just come back from a trip there and seen President Assad. We'll get on to that in a moment or two. But just on Chilcot, are you also worried, given this process, the checking, security vetting process is being gone through? It has already been Maxwellised, so to speak. Those people that are mentioned and perhaps criticised within it have had a chance to respond. Are you worried that it might pull its punches?
I would think it's unlikely. The Maxwellisation process was a negotiation process, and it shouldn't have been. I mean, they employed, at your expense and mine, taxpayers' expense, very expensive lawyers to defend the reputations of generals and politicians and so on. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about fact-checking. So there's a possibility that's blunted the edge. But I think, Chilcot must understand, this is probably the last thing he's going to do in public life. If this is a whitewash, it will be seen as a whitewash. It will be described as a whitewash, and his reputation will go the way of somebody who writes a whitewash. So I don't think so. I think every incentive is there for him to get it right.
OK, EU referendum. Well, the government view is we remain and wheeling out the big economic guns in recent days, and indeed coming up, we are told, a Treasury report going to warn about all kinds of things, including recession, job losses, and Stephen Crabb saying today that we could have an economic effect as big as that from the banking crash in 2008. Do you think Project Fear is building up?
Yeah, and in many decades ago, a sort of namesake of mine, Manny Rice Davis, said they would say that, wouldn't they? And I'm afraid that's the way the public is beginning to see this. We've had the IMF last week. Well, IMF is not an impartial organisation. Dominique Lagarde, the head of it.
Hold on, Christine Lagarde.
Sorry, beg your pardon. Christine Lagarde. I'm rolling two into one.
Let's not get that
sorry,
mixed
I beg
up.
your pardon. Christine Lagarde was involved in the setting of the terms for Greece, and now admits, by the way, they got it wrong. So all of this sort of the international establishments rolling out the stories to try and support the government line on this, I think the public are going to say, actually, it's our decision. We believe what we want to believe.
And is it a misuse of resources? I mean, you've had the row about the overall leaflet and the £9.3 million that cost. Here's another organ of government, the Treasury, being used to put this.
I mean, there's a really serious problem for the government in this, in that the public will begin to think they're cheating. That they spent, as you say, the millions on that leaflet. They're diverting resources. They've got a large unit being set up especially at number 10 for this. It's beginning to look like propaganda rather than proper government.
And what do you think then on that, if it's a tight vote, but Remain win, and people have that view, the people, particularly in the Conservative Party, who lost, who wanted to leave like you, will that alter their attitude to the Prime Minister as leader?
I'm not sure about that, but I think what it will do is it'll make the referendum, as the Scottish one is, a never-endum. It's going to come back. This was supposed to resolve this thing for 30, 40 years, if not forever. In truth, it will continue to haunt.
And Mr. Cameron's future, Ken Clarke, of course, saying if he loses, 30 seconds.
I don't agree with that. I mean, I think the simple truth is that if Brexit wins, more accurately, then there will be an argument that the people who've been arguing against it can't renegotiate it, but there are plenty of people around he can appoint, put in charge, and say they've got basically sole power over this very, very important negotiation, that can be done.
But hold on, I mean, that would be the most fundamental thing facing the United Kingdom, its future relationship with the European Union. So you've got a Prime Minister there who is first name lame, second name duck.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's fundamental. It's not running the whole country, but it is fundamental to the future of the country. But then that's where we are. I mean, that's simply what's going to happen, I think.
OK, and who would you, any personalities in mind on the Leave side? Well, we've got Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, Theresa Villiers was.
Yeah, you've got a non-stop list of them. There's about 8 of them, isn't there, that were signed up from cabinet. So I don't think there's a problem finding somebody to do it. And indeed, in the middle ranks of government, there are other people who are very much on side. 1 or 2, like Dominic Raab, who have been negotiators for the country in the past. So you could actually populate a whole department with people who really want to work.
But there are Chinese walls here. The Prime Minister is not allowed or not allowed to get involved or not allowed to have his view.
No, I don't think that. But I think if you are going to have a negotiator, you appoint somebody who really believes in it, really wants to do it, really wants to succeed, and has spent the last 3 months at least, if not the last several years, thinking about how this will work, which is pretty much what all the Brexit team have been doing.
OK, now I want to move on to Syria because it's a very important information and insight into the thinking of President Assad. First of all, why did you want to go and see him? Because, a lot of people are saying we should engage with these kind of monsters.
Look, at the moment, the biggest issue in Europe, as it turns out, is mass migration and terrorism. And we, on our own estimates, not the Syrian estimates, on our own estimates, there are about 1,000 jihadists a year arriving in Europe from Syria. The Syrian agencies think it's 3 times that, so to give you an idea of the size, that's overwhelming our ability to deal with it, as we see with Brussels and Paris and so on. So we have to go back to the source and fix this at source, which is why I went out. The current policy, the options, the outcomes are going to be what? Either the jihadists win, which actually will be a disaster, an absolute disaster, wipe away the sort of liberal society in Syria. It's not a liberal state, but it's a liberal society. Secondly, there is a sort of very, very long negotiation. For every year the negotiation goes on, that's another 1,000 terrorists. That's another 10, 20, 100,000 migrants. Or the Syrians win. And if the Syrian government wins. And if the Syrian government wins, and it's only the Russians talking to them, they're not going to sort out their torture, murder of prisoners, and general attitude to the population. So my view is we need to get a grip on this somehow. We need to get our hand on the table as well, our card in the deck, and that's why I want to find out what the attitude of the government.
I mean, you say there, the influence that the Russians have. Now, how did they do that? By supporting Assad militarily. Presumably you're not saying that Britain should go that far, but have to get involved with the Assad regime.
I asked Assad about the relationship with the Russians. I asked him actually why that they downscaled their activities. And he gave a very interesting answer. He said that it's because they were being accused of stymieing the negotiations by giving so much support. Actually, they're still getting a lot of support. There were Russian soldiers there, there were Russian pilots when I was there and so on. But what was interesting is Putin said to Assad, "We will not let you lose." Now that's going to alters the complete complexion, the attitude of the Syrian government, the attitude of the other players in the game, as it were, the Saudis and Qataris and so on. It seems to me you've got a country that's nearly destroyed, $100 billion of damage minimum to the infrastructure. What we should be looking at is a global Marshall Plan to put this country back together again. It used to be the Germany of the Middle East, the Germany of the Levant, the breadbasket, the textile industries, pharmaceuticals, you name it. If we said that, then that gives us a card to play as well as something to do about it.
Do we say, for the time being, President Assad, you're the one to lead that government?
One of the problems here, and it is difficult, what the war has done is polarised the population. And there are a very large number of them so terrified of the jihadists that they're now supporters of Assad. One of the best NGO people, I saw somebody there who was actually running one of the most important NGOs, and he said, if there's an election tomorrow, Assad will win easily. So that's the problem. We've got to put democracy in place. We've got to change the behaviour of the Syrian government. That's the most important thing. Save the Syrian people from the torture and the killings that go on, and actually use it to get Western influence back in this important country.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.